The right time to get credit, as everybody knows, is when you don't need it and when you don't plan on using it for emergencies. So there's a big difference between using a credit card in an emergency and for an emergency. In an emergency is where you have the money. Maybe you've got your quick and dirty, or you've got some kind of emergency fund set aside, but you need to get the plumber over right now and they need a card to hold the appointment. That would be an example of needing it in an emergency. You have the money, but the card number is just going to be the thing that helps facilitate the transaction. For an emergency is when you don't have the money and you're using credit card and hoping you can pay it off later. In an emergency is knowing you can pay it off right away, and you do. And an example would be like, when you're going to a Metallica concert in the 90s and you're Carrie Blakeney and you're wearing super cute cutoff jean shorts and you don't want a wad of cash to wreck your figure, and you aren't anticipating spending anything. So you'd keep it on you, but you wouldn't use it. That's sort of the idea behind using it responsibly. We just don't want to use it if we can help it.
Do you have frogs at your house?
Okay, it is so weird that you're asking this.
Why?
Because I live on a pond.
Yeah.
And which I think a lot of builders now, they're like, oh, look at this beautiful pond. I'm like, that's a slough, but whatever. Go ahead, put your walkouts around it. Let's call it, fancy. But I live on a pond, and there's been this noise lately, and we're all arguing about whether or not it's frogs or something else. And so why is there a frog infestation here, or why are you asking?
No, I'm just asking because I love this time of the year. Like, that's my favorite thing to go to bed by, is like get into bed, open the window, and then frogs. And it is like a freaking frog symphony out there right now.
Have you
It's such a good
seen
time
them?
of the year.
Because
No, I never see them.
that's what I mean. How do we know they're frogs?
Oh, come on. What else makes that noise?
Well, I don't know. I also thought for the longest time the chipmunks and squirrels behind my house were birds. So that cheep cheep sound really confused me for a long period of time. So I don't trust my own ears.
What sound? What was it? That's it?
I thought that was a bird.
Um, okay, well, it could be a bird, I guess. Like, that's a birdish sound
What
too.
is the sound that you're hearing that
It,
makes you think it's frogs?
I hear frogs. That's how I know it's frogs.
Like they're just saying ribbit or what?
No, but wait, I gotta find frogs.
I love that we have this general distrust of each other's ears. We're now at the age where we're like, are you sure you're not hearing things?
Like this is not a noise that a human can make. It's something like, it's like the frog is like rolling. It's rolling in our.
That's the sound we make when our teens make a 3-pointer on the basketball court. Isn't that the noise?
It's something like that. Oh dear. Anyway, I have a lot of frogs and I love it. I really do. It's like my favorite thing. I've never once seen a frog in my backyard. I know that they like live in my wall and stuff in the backyard. But I have yet to see one, which is probably good because I think that would probably freak me out if actually one hopped in my general direction.
What do we do to attract them? Like we could get like a bucket or something, and we could just,
No, I don't want it,
No,
Erin.
I'm not saying to pet it, but just to see if it actually exists. Like we could put it in a cage and just look at it and then set it free.
I feel like I'm not going to do that.
Okay, so you're like everybody who listened to Enter Sandman in the 1990s. You like the one song, but you don't want anything else to do with Metallica.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. I just think that I'm so lucky where I am. I was talking with some basketball parents the other day, and they live only like a couple neighborhoods over. And we were talking about like noises we hear at night. And it was just so funny to hear the difference because I'm like, what do you hear? And she's like, well, sometimes I hear the neighbors fighting and we hear the cars screeching on the highway. I'm like, oh, cool, cool. I'm like, I have frogs. And I also hear the coyotes like almost every night. And because I'm right on the edge of the city, I also get some cows. There's like a farm right there. And then like I get like a late night moo also. If this is the first time you are listening to this podcast, I do want you to know that I believe this is the first time we've made animal noises. Is it?
As far as I recall.
I mean, who's to say? We do some pretty ridiculous things around here. But if you're just joining us, I promise we'll get to the money stuff in just a minute. But I wanted to read a couple of these reviews. Have you seen some of these that have come in?
Well, I just want to thank everybody who has bothered to stop and rate and review the podcast because I think that's one of the things we forget that is so important to grow. And I just want to acknowledge you all have like stepped up for us in such a big way, like leaving your words and your ratings in your own words, like coming up with, what you actually think. It's good feedback for us. But it also really helps keep us at the top of the charts, which is super cool for us. A couple of broadcasting students, washed up, middle-aged broadcasting students talking about frogs in their backyards. But I think what's exceptional about that is then you help us reach other people in order to keep financial literacy, especially for women, accessible, accurate, helpful. And so that's all because every time you rate and review the podcast, somebody else's eyeballs get to see it.
That is the coolest thing, and it's proven that it works because we're hearing from people who have said, "I just came across this. Like I just suddenly found you, and I never saw you before. So obviously, what you're doing is working. So thank you, and please keep doing it." But I want to read a couple of these ones that came in. This one I'm going to call her Meg SZA, like the kids would say, like
Okay.
SZA, like that's a singer, right?
An artist, yeah.
Oh yeah, right. She's an artist. Bet you she could make frog sounds. She says, "What I have always been looking for." She says, "I just found this a few weeks ago. Erin treats money with respect as a tool and for it to enrich ourselves, our families, and our communities. I love the common sense take, the humor, and the humanity." Um, this one says, "Why Get the Hell Out of Debt is a must to follow. I stumbled upon Erin Skye Kelly's podcast while on a cruise ship, wondering how the hell I'm going to replenish the money thrown at that lavish vacation. It was the best find ever because Erin's shoot from the hip approach is one that almost everyone in debt needs, especially me."
Does she have a name? Did she leave a name?
That came from Buford143.
Okay, Buford 143. You need to check your data plan when you get back because those cruise ships not have the best Wi-Fi. But I'm so glad you're here. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, so good. Okay, what are we talking about today?
We're talking about credit card mistakes. This comes up
Mm.
so often because we get a credit card and we think, oh, yes, I'm approved. I'm now validated. I'm worthy. I'm in the club.
Mhm.
And especially if it has rewards or other points attached to it, we can start, down a spending spiral that maybe isn't necessarily healthy, financially speaking. And so I'm just going to talk a little bit about the typical mistakes people make with credit cards so that we can really all assess ourselves and see how we're doing. Now, you're going to know for you what the right answer is because inside the Get the Hell Out of Debt program, we often tell people if you struggle, you need to go on a credit card detox. It's not about trying to manage it. It's about like, this is for me or it's not for me right now, based on where I'm at. I've got some other healing to do. But some people can do this program and still keep a credit card active. So let's just go back in time. Okay. If we had been very good borrowers from the start, we might have made different decisions. Now, most of us weren't educated. How old were you when you got your first credit card?
I think it was the first year, like college.
Mhm. Yeah, they attacked you in the hallway, didn't
Yep.
they?
Yep.
Which is so weird because as a grown up, once you're well out of school, in order to borrow anything, they're like, let me see your income, let me see your pay stubs, let me see your tax return, and then we'll assess whether or not you can borrow. You're a fresh-faced kid out alone for the first time, likely don't have a job. If you do, it probably is not very skilled or it pays minimum wage. And they're like, here, kid,
Mm.
here's something.
And also, here's your ball cap, or your where we live. Here's your winter scarf.
Is that what you got, a scarf?
I feel like I got a scarf. I was like, "Ooh, I'm gonna need this for the long walk over here in the winter from Res."
Oh yeah, from Res. You lived in Res. You were too cool. Do you want more? I know you do. Why wouldn't you want more? More
More
of this,
what? What do I
more,
want more of?
more of this. Come
Oh,
hang out in the online course for Get the Hell Out of Debt. The link is in the description. You just got to click it, sign up, and we'll see you in there. I signed up for mine based on the cash back. So I think I racked it up to $30,000 and I got something like 300 cash back.
Oh my
Smart
goodness.
decision. Anyway, not $30,000 in one go. Okay. That was listen, I had to work hard to get there. I had to slowly make minimum payments for a really long time. Anyway, if we would have been good borrowers from the start, here's probably what we would have done. We would have already had a handle on cash flow and not had income needs that weren't being met. And what happens for most people that are young is they don't have a budget. And so we're sending them off to school, or we're sending them off into the world if they're not going to school and they're just going to, sort of young adult their way through life without understanding how to properly manage cash flow or how to budget. And so we're telling them you need a credit card in order to build credit. That is like step 7 in the whole, how to be an adult process. They first need to know how to manage cash. And if they don't have enough cash, they need to know how to increase their cash flow. That's far more important than building credit in the beginning, because otherwise, Visa or MasterCard foots the bill for the difference. And the right time to get credit, as everybody knows, is when you don't need it. And
Mhm.
when you don't plan on using it for emergencies. So there's a big difference between using a credit card in an emergency and using a credit card for an emergency. And in an emergency is where you have the money. Maybe you've got your quick and dirty, or you've got some kind of emergency fund set aside. But you need to get the plumber over right now and they need a card to hold the appointment. That would be an example of needing it in an emergency. You have the money, but the card number is just going to be the thing that helps facilitate the transaction. For an emergency is when you don't have the money and you're using credit card and hoping you can pay it off later.
Mhm.
In an emergency is knowing you can pay it off right away, and you do. Um, and an example would be like, when you're going to a Metallica concert in the 90s and you're Carrie Blakely and you're wearing super cute cutoff jean shorts and you don't want a wad of cash, to wreck your figure. And you aren't anticipating spending anything. But pro tip, you can also do that with a debit card. Debit cards and credit cards are the same size. So it's like, you'd keep it on you, but you wouldn't use it. That's sort of the idea behind using it responsibly we just don't want to use it if we can help it.
Is there any good time to use it?
Yeah, like if you need that plumber, like
Mm.
and they're like, or you're on the side of the road and you're waiting for a tow truck and they're like, we need your credit card number, and you give them your credit card number, but you'll have the cash.
Mhm. Right. So what about the people that are going to the grocery store though, like we talk about, and are putting their groceries on their credit card?
Listen, I talk about that a ton in the book, Get the Hell Out of Debt. There are people out there who can psychologically, metabolically, whatever, put all their groceries on their card every month and pay it off every month. There
Mhm.
are people who can do that. Most people who do that are behind a month, meaning they need to put their groceries on and then that paycheck hits and then they have to pay it off. But if that paycheck stopped, they'd be in trouble.
Mhm.
But there are also people out there who can drink a sip of tequila and
Yeah.
not end up on the speakers dancing till 3 a.m. and then going to Denny's.
Right.
So everybody's different. And we can't assume that there's, one right way to do it. And I hear lots of financial experts say, oh, just pay it off every month and get the points and use it to fly first class and whatever. And I'm like, that's not how most people use credit, unfortunately. That sounds lovely if somebody has the understanding and the financial literacy background and the money muscles built up in order to be able to do that. But most of the time, the credit card companies are incentivizing people to get into debt and stay into debt. And they know that. They're far better at the psychology of people than that financial expert who happens to be able to fly first class because their income's so high that they're putting everything on the card to get the points to, do the thing. Most of the time, for most people, the points don't add up to a value high enough that it makes it worth it. Meaning there's blackout periods or there's all kinds of stipulations, and sometimes just looking for a cheap flight can be more cost effective than, the amount of spending required to rack up that amount of points. So you really have to be careful with those numbers.
Not to mention the amount of time that we have to spend to try to make the points work in our favor. I feel like I have spent a lot of time in the past just trying to make the points even work out.
Mhm.
But also, too, we overspend when we use our cards, right?
Yeah, it depends on the statistics you see, and every country has different stats. I think it's because sometimes economists in certain countries want to make things look a certain way to the government when they're doing their reporting or, what's going on. But on average, it's between 18 and 24% more that we're spending when we're using cards. So you can imagine on a $100 purchase, you're spending $125 or more, which doesn't seem like a lot on one purchase, but added up in the aggregate over a year is a lot of extra spending when you're
Mhm.
using a card. So It's just something to keep in mind, especially when you're thinking, oh, but I'm going to get the points. Oh, but I'm going to get the points. Dangerous, dangerous thinking. So the second thing we would have done if we had been good borrowers from the start, we would have only utilized 7% or less of credit, and we would have been building wealth the whole time. So we would have been managing that cash flow and doing something called pay yourself first, which everybody hears about, but nobody does. And the way we teach it inside the Get the Hell Out of Debt program is you're going to do your budget and your cash flow. You're going to figure out next month's expenses today and next month's income today based on your best crystal ball predictions. Okay, we know life is going to change, but we're going to make our best predictions. Write them all down, make sure and you can do it with an app. I have a favorite app that I use, which I can put in the show notes for you. I have a spreadsheet that I use that you're welcome to have for free. There's lots of people like to do pen and paper. That works too. I don't care how you do it. You just got to track it. Okay. And what you're doing is you're putting in all of those numbers, and then the difference between what you anticipate spending and the income that's coming in, you're going to use that money to pay yourself first. So that's coming out off the top. Now, ideally, way back when you started and you didn't have any debt, you would have taken that money and you would have started investing it. Can you imagine if back then, even 10% of your income you had taken out and consistently, you're shaking your head. You're like, no.
No, because I hate thinking about this. I know that it's such a smart idea, but I hate whenever we talk about it because I didn't do it, Erin Skye Kelly. I needed you 100 years ago to tell me to do this because now I'm just angry when we talk about it because I didn't do it. And if I do that math, it's painful to see what those numbers are. Yeah.
Well, I think it can be painful, but it can also be motivating. And this is why we teach people how to use the compound interest calculator, because then you're able to see what small little differences you make today, what they can add up to in the long run. And what's super cool about all of this is if you had been doing it, you'd be very wealthy today, which means that if you start doing it today in a short amount of time, you can also be very wealthy. Now, of course, there's always those, every financial planner on the planet like has that one financial illustration of Ben and Chad. And Ben started investing at the age of 18 until he was 25, and then he stopped and he never put another penny in. And at the age of 40, he had $40 billion. And then whatever other guy put in the same amount of money for this many years and he only had $100,000, right? Like, forget about all of that. Let's not look in the rearview mirror. We just glance in the rearview mirror. That's all we just did. We just looked in the rearview mirror, but we're focused on the windshield. We're focused forward so that we don't crash.
Mhm.
And now we have time to course correct. So we're going to do that. But if we had started way back then, we would have absolutely taken out what we would have, been squeezing out of the budget in order to build wealth. And then that money comes off the top, and we would have then had to be resourceful with what's left over. Now, there's going to be people who be like, yeah, but then what if I overspend on my groceries? Well, that's the work of the budget. That's the work you're going to do when you're doing your 10 minutes a day money dates or any of that stuff. And I know that there's lots of people out there who are like, I don't want to spend 10 minutes a day with my money. I'm like, well, then you're not going to have a good relationship. Only looked at her husband once or twice a year, right around tax time. She's like, I should pay attention to you. And then she's like, good enough, get out of here. They would not have the amazing fun relationship that they have. So you're building a relationship with your money. You need to spend a couple minutes a day just paying attention to how it's going. So you would have utilized 7% or less credit on that card, meaning that if your credit card had $1,000 limit on it, you would have never put more than $70 on it before you paid it off. And that utilization is something that would have increased that credit score. But most people, especially young ones, they look and they see, I've got $1,000 on here. So they put $1,000 of expenses on that card. They use the full max available limit. And that does negatively impact the credit score, unfortunately. So what that would have done, though, had we done it that way, had we done everything correctly from the beginning, it would have given us an epic credit score. And then from there, we would have begun leveraging investments like real estate and cash flow positive businesses. So I do not want you to think of debt in terms of good debt and bad debt. I hate that
Mm.
so much.
I know anytime somebody says that, I feel like your eye starts twitching, like you have to bite like every part of your tongue.
I know all of it. Yeah, all debt carries risk. But if you had to spend $10 every month and whatever you spent it on gave you back $18 every month, would you do that deal?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. But if you didn't have the $10 and you had to borrow it and the cost of borrowing was going to cost you $2, but still
Mm.
$12 to get the $18. Would you do it?
Maybe.
Maybe, right? Maybe, probably.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a little bit more risk, right? But if we were to scale it, and you had the ability to give me $100 every month and I was going to give you back 180, would you do it?
Yeah.
Yeah. What about $1,000? You're going to give me $1,000 and I'm going to give you 1,800. Would you do it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can I do that right now? Like, what's your bank number?
No deal. No deal. But if you had to borrow, right, and it was $1,200 you had to give me and you were going to get $1,800 back, would you do it?
Yeah, I want $600.
Okay, so the answer is probably, maybe, right?
Yes.
But there
Yeah.
are lots of factors, right? Lots of risk factors we have to consider. We have to consider whether, what happens if they call that loan? Are you going to be able to pay it back? What is that money like sort of secured against? That's
Mm,
going to be a factor. Like there's going to be a number of factors. But what most people are doing is they're just borrowing $1,000 to buy their groceries and their gas and all of the things, and it's costing them $1,200. There's not a
mhm.
return on it.
Gotcha.
So the key with all of that is like it's not about good debt or bad debt, it's all about risk. And life isn't exactly like that, right? It's not like you're going to hand over X amount and you're going to get that amount back every month. Like it's not exact. It's not in a vacuum, as they say. Life serves up a few kicks in the pants sometimes, right? And most of the time, those kicks in the pants teach us and make us grow. And sometimes they feel like tests that we need to pass. And there's all kinds of things that go on. But like oftentimes, they're just like unfair, crappy things that happen. Like, you know what I mean? You're driving down the road and somebody comes out of nowhere and swipes your vehicle and now you've got a medical injury and potentially a car insurance issue and all kinds of other challenges, right? It can happen like this. And
Mhm.
so there's so many things we're not accounting for. And then what happens if you don't have the ability to go earn the money to pay things back? Like there's just all kinds of other equations. So it's not about good debt and bad debt. It's about what is the risk based on my abilities right now and how much of a buffer do I have? Obviously, the bigger buffer you have or the more sources of income you have, the easier it is to take those kinds of risks. But in the beginning, the way to build that wealth and to manage credit isn't to go use as much credit as possible.
Mhm.
That's the mistake that the banks are teaching is like, oh, build a good credit score, use your credit card, get some free points, go on a trip. It's like you're missing the whole point as to why we would want to build a credit score in the first place, which is to make it easier in the long run to build wealth, which isn't borrowing on your credit card.
Who was it that made us think that our credit scores are so important in the first place?
Well, the credit card companies, they're the ones that invented the scoring.
Well, they did a good job because I feel like there's so many people, even that are coming into this program, are joining us and they talk about their credit scores and how they want to have a good credit score.
Yeah, the whole industry is designed. It's weird. It's like we're playing a game with snakes, but snakes are making the rules, and the snakes change the rules sometimes, but you're already in the snake pit. So what are you going to do?
Hmm.
Did you ever play a instrument in band?
Yes, I did.
You did. I played the trumpet. This girl I was friends with played the trumpet, and I couldn't decide what instrument to play. I really wanted to play the flute. I could just see myself as a flautist. All of the pretty girls played the flute. You know what I mean? In school,
Mhm.
like all the cute ones, the popular
Yep.
ones, played the flute.
Yep.
I played the trumpet, the loud, obnoxious. But Susan grew up in the church, and so the trumpet has a lot of meaning for her family. And surely on Easter Sunday, when he is risen, she could have played some triumphant song and made her family very proud. I played the Dances with Wolves solo. I played.
Wow. I feel like that's good.
So uncool, so uncool. But we had a band instructor who lived just behind my alley, and I would take private lessons from him and his wife. They're the coolest people, Jer and Susie. And actually, Jared and I were just looking at them on social media the other day because I just love them so much. They're one of those couples who they just look like they have a lot of fun together and always have. And she is so cool. She's like tatted up, like she still gets tattoos. I don't know how old she'd be, probably 60s, 70s, maybe. I don't even
Okay.
know. She's got to be younger than that. But anyway, she's just the mom that like all the other kids wished their moms were as cool as, you know?
Hmm. Yep.
Anyway, but he would do all kinds of things on the side, like he would tune pianos and he would fix instruments. And we had this girl who played the clarinet, and just for whatever reason, every time she would play, it was like And he did all kinds of things with her. Like he would look at her teeth placement on the reed and like he'd get her a new fresh reed and it would kind of come out like a like it would do a little better. And it was just like this whole thing. And for whatever reason, she couldn't get her, whatever they call it, the embouchure right and whatever to get the sound to be whatever. So one day he's like, just give me the clarinet. He takes the clarinet and he replaces the reed and he plays it. And it's also not working
Oh,
for him. And so he did a bunch of tinkering and ordered in some parts and fixed it all up for her and gave it back to her. And she actually became a better clarinet player,
hmm.
especially because she'd had to really focus on her finger work to try and even get it to do what it was doing before. And it reminds me of how sometimes it's not even you, it's the tools you're using that are setting you up to fail.
So yeah, because it was something wrong with the clarinet. It wasn't her.
Yes. And so sometimes it is that you got a credit card at a young age and you tried to, transfer money from here over to here and you're doing a balance transfer and you've got the wrong set of tools to build
Mhm.
wealth. You've got the right set of tools to build debt. Honk, but you don't have the right set of tools to build wealth. And so sometimes it's a matter of like looking at all of the tools that you've been using so far in your life and going, you know what? I got to take this to Dr. Fryatt and get him to fix it because or I need to bring it to Erin and Carrie and get them to give me a whole new set of tools so that I can properly do the thing that I'm trying to do here without much frustration.
I do you want to hear what instrument I played?
I'm dying to know.
I feel like we must have talked about this at some point. I mean, it is totally embarrassing. It's still something I deeply regret. I, in my small town, they gave out instruments
Mhm.
based on your last name. And
Oh,
my maiden name is in the bottom part of the alphabet.
yeah.
Okay. So again, like you said, I totally wanted to be a flautist also, but there it turns out a lot of the girls that I went to school with had last names that began with A, B, C's, and D's. Okay.
Oh,
Like the flutes were gone. Okay. Next up, the clarinets gone,
alto sax. Next.
gone.
On. Yeah.
Like now drums gone, like everything is gone because only one person's going to get to play the drums anyway. Like you don't need
Oh my
multiple.
God. All that's left are the tubas and the trombones.
Hey, I got the baritone. Do you know what that
Oh,
is? It's
yes.
small tuba,
No.
but that's all that was left. It was all that was
Is that
left.
the thing you had to like place on your knee?
Aaron, it's just like picture a tuba, just a little
Yeah,
tiny
I
bit
know. I
smaller,
know.
like
I
one
know.
size down.
And the mouthpiece was about the same as the trumpet. So you had to do the same thing I did, which is,
Hmm. Yep,
yeah,
correct. But
it's
that
not
like,
cute.
but I would have taken a trumpet. The trumpets were gone. They were gone.
Even trumpets were gone.
All I remember is I had to take the school bus back in those days and
Mhm.
trying to load that mother trucker onto a school bus. Like it had to stay at the front of the bus because it was too big for me to take to my seat. Meanwhile, A, B's, and C's are carrying their baby cases and holding them on their laps and opening and looking up the nice shininess. Thank goodness for my buddy Lee. Lee lived on the same street as me and I lived down at the end and he was at the beginning, but he would every day, Lee would take off my baritone for me and at
Oh,
least get it off the bus because it was a disaster trying to get it on and off. So,
that's so
Lee,
sweet.
I still remember your chivalry and that made it this much better. He never laughed at me either for the baritone, which was also nice of Lee, wasn't it?
Wait, I feel like this, if this had been the 1990s, this would have been a rom-com. Did Lee ever have feelings for you that were unrequited? Because that's how this sounds. You're here now, I don't know, 100 years later, being like, it was so nice, don't you think? And I'm like, wait a second, I've seen this movie.
It all started in band.
You're the baritone babe in his version of the story. There's the babe on the bus, played the baritone.
There is no rom-com with a baritone.
Yeah. Okay, so here's how to choose the right band instrument or the right credit card for you. Okay. So if you have carried debt, then you are not going to play the points game. Okay. Look for no fee cards. And when I say no fee, okay, here's the deal. I get so annoyed, right?
The eyes twitching again.
When people hear me say no fee,
Mm.
they always come up with a list of exceptions. Well,
Mhm.
what about this? What about this? If I said to you, no peanuts because I had a peanut allergy, would you be like, okay, but how about just these 7 peanuts? No, no fee, not an annual fee, not a low annual fee, not a fee for like zero fees, none. Okay.
Right. Yeah.
And I want you to make sure the credit card is where you bank so that you can make payments easily. So those of you that have been in the program, the online program, which we'll link in the show notes, you can, hear me 100 times say your quick and dirty does not live at the same bank where you bank, but your credit card can be there because I want you to be able to pay it and pay it quickly.
Mhm.
I don't want you to have 4 business days before that payment appears. Okay. So we want to be able to pay it off quickly. I don't want you to use it though. That's the big kicker. And I think the big piece is if you're trying to build your credit, you want one Visa and one MasterCard. So not 2 MasterCards or 2 Amexes or 2 Visas. You want one, like 2 different brands. You need a $1,500 minimum trade line, meaning $1,500 minimum balance, though $2,000 makes it a little bit easier now. They're sort of changing the rules a little bit. And you are never, ever, ever, never, ever, ever, never, 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 ever going to put more than $140 on there. So some people say, I'm just going to put my groceries in my gas. Well, good luck if you can get a tank of gas or some groceries for less than $140, but don't do it. Don't do the groceries and gas thing. Not now, not if you're trying to improve that score. Okay. I don't even want you playing the score game. So you have to realize how hard this is for me to give you this advice. Okay. Um, and I want you to use your debit, otherwise known as money, for groceries and gas instead of plastic. So you're not going to get rich on points, you're going to get rich on money. Okay. So we only play the game only to get the good score, and that's it. We don't play it to try and get reward points or any of that stuff. Okay. So now let's talk debt. Some of you are like, okay, that's nice, Erin. That would be great advice if you, like Carrie said, had been here 100 years ago, but you weren't. And now I made this big pile of caca and I need to get out of it. Okay. What you have to do is you've got to bring those balances under the limits if they're over limit. This is especially important if you are planning on getting any kind of mortgage or anything like that in the future. Now, I don't, again, that's a whole other thing. I don't know if people know this, but you can actually buy houses with cash. It's hard to do, but
Mhm.
you don't need a mortgage. And I think when you look at the total cost of borrowing on a mortgage, which most people don't do, but if you had a $250,000 mortgage in most parts of the world right now, it's going to cost you over $600,000 for that same home over 25 or 30 years. And so what are the odds that over 25 or 30 years, if you were really good with money, you could save up $600,000?
Mhm.
Probably pretty good, right?
Mhm.
So somewhere between that 250 and 600, you could actually pay for house and cash, but we're impatient because we're human and we want the American dream. We want the white picket fence. We want this giant nightmare of finance that everybody seems to think is a dream. So we're impatient. But I'm saying all this because I want you to bring those balances well under the limits and keep them there. You need to make those minimum payments on time. That one you already knew. So give yourself a high five. You already knew that one. But it's tricky because they aren't on schedule like paychecks tend to be. So you really have to pay attention. Most people, if I said to you, when's your next minimum payment due on your card? They're like, I don't know.
Mhm.
So you really have to pay attention. Okay. And that's why that 5 minute a day money date is really important. You're going to log into the different things and check them out and put important dates in your calendar, write things down, really make sure that you're paying close attention so you know what's happening. And even just spending the 10 minutes a day with your money keeps you paying attention to it, but not obsessed with it. You're going to then, of course, you're going to do the budget and the net worth. Remember that the budget's entire job is to make the net worth go up. And when you do that, you're winning. So it doesn't matter if you're doing that because you're paying credit cards down or liabilities down or you're buying assets. As long as that net worth is going up every month, you're winning. Now, ideally, we want to do that by buying assets. We don't want to do it by having a bunch of debt that we have to pay off, but we start wherever we are. And
Mhm.
we're going to do this all through the journey. So even once your debt's paid off, you're going to do the same thing. This is what rich people do. They make their net worth go up every month by buying assets. Okay. So you're going to do all of that. And then the next thing you're going to do is really monitor your credit. Now, I have historically been anti credit monitoring services because oftentimes the credit monitoring services are there to sell you debt. They're there to help you get more debt. But I have been working with, we've been for a couple of months now, been working with ClearScore, and I'm quite impressed with them as far as credit card monitoring services go because I do not think it's cool that you have to pay Equifax and TransUnion and Ilion and all of these companies $20 a month to monitor your credit score that they're making you
Right.
keep score of.
Right.
Asinine.
You're paying them to play their game.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's like you and I, tonight we're going to a basketball game, you and I are.
Mhm.
It's like we have to pay for tickets to like get in the arena. But it's like if, the basketball gets thrown out of bounds and then we catch it, we have to throw it back to them. They're like, that'll be another $50. You'd be like, what? Like, that's not how this works, right?
Yeah.
So the ClearScore app is 100% free forever. You're going to get access to your credit score and the credit report via the link in the show notes, which I'll give you. Okay. It's provided by TransUnion, which is one of the top credit reporting agencies. And your score is going to fall as a Canadian between 300 and 900. So the higher the score, the better, obviously. It takes about 3 minutes to find out your score. It's how long it takes to sign up. And checking your score is risk-free. It's not going to impact your score. Whereas sometimes if you go, let's say, I want to go shop for a loan and I start going to like all the different banks. Every time they pull my credit, it's going to lower my score.
Mhm.
So when you're using ClearScore, checking your score is risk-free, okay? You're going to get personalized insights about your credit score and tips on how to improve your personal score. And an improved credit score could get you access to a greater range of deals on financial products. However, you're going to use your critical thinking skills and decide whether or not you need that. You're going to make an informed decision, okay? There's 21 million users worldwide that use this app. And the people who have been in the Get the Hell Out of Debt program, who signed up and who used it, have all given it rave reviews. Because I didn't just want it to be me. I wanted, as a group, as a community, us to be like, is this the right product for us? And
Mhm.
so it turns out it's fantastic. So we are very excited about it, and we'll put the link in the show notes. But the point is, you're going to check it as part of your 10-minute money date once a week, maybe, or at least once a month. And you're just going to make sure that the decisions you're making and the tools that they're suggesting and the things that you're doing are increasing that score. And if it's not, if the score is headed in the wrong direction, you're going to make some tweaks to the decisions that you're making so that you can keep the score going up.
Yeah, the idea is that we're going to use this now while we're still floundering and figuring out how we're going to pay off our debt and what kind of situation we're actually in, right? Like this is to set us up long term and to
Yes.
help us learn what works and what doesn't.
Yes. And what's interesting is I've had a lot of people who've, graduated this program. We've talked to many of them here on this podcast. They pay off all their debt and their credit score jumps like astronomically, right? And so that's going to happen, of course, but it will gradually start to increase the more that utilization comes down. So the more you pay that debt down, the higher the score will be.
Since we started with frogs, do you want to also hear what a baritone sounds like?
Yep.
Okay, let's picture me playing that.
Well, that actually sounds quite beautiful.
Okay, but also just know that the person playing that is not me. Like that is not the noises that I would make. This is like a seasoned baritonist that has
Oh.
chosen to play this instrument. That wasn't me.
Just like an oboe, right? Like an oboe is actually a very beautiful instrument when played correctly. So is a baritone. But like a band student, like a grade 7 bucktooth band student playing the baritone, it is, my gosh, it takes a special type of music teacher. It takes like a Mr. Holland to turn
Yeah.
that into something.
Yeah.
So I'm not knocking baritones or baritone players. I'm knocking the
Me
kids in
playing
band
it.
who get stuck with it, when it's not like a dream that's been placed on your heart.